Hi, I'm Kara-Leah from the Yoga Lunchbox, and I'm here today with Suzanne Sterling, who is another of the amazing teachers that's coming down to Wanderlust both in Australia and New Zealand. Now, Suzanne is a ecstatic vocalist, a dedicated musician, a yogi, and an activist, and she's taken those threads and tied them all together to create this unique offering, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, two things majorly is off the mat and into the world, and also, of course, Wanderlust. So, welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here with you.
Oh, it's exciting to talk to you because, I'm a big fan of chanting and ritual, etc., and don't always get to talk to other teachers who are really into it. But before we come to that, let's take a step back and look at off the mat. So, for those that don't know what off the mat into the world is, what's the short little description that you like to give people?
Well, Off the Mat Into the World is a nonprofit organization, and we offer trainings to help people who have been yoga practitioners for a while find the way that they want to serve. And so what we realized is that there were incredible resources at hand with the millions of people doing yoga in the world, that there were spiritual resources being uncovered and revealed, that there are incredible amounts of just simple real world resources. And if we could aggregate those resources, we could become a force for change as a global community, as a global community of people who have similar values and who are waking up to the crisis of the times and are potentially healthy enough to be able to offer themselves as servants for change, for healing, for the shift that we know needs to happen on this planet. So, we had this grander vision, and we've been incredibly successful training people. We've had a lot of people come through our trainings and start their own nonprofits and their own initiatives, and we're really in the business of creating leaders. So now we have many initiatives. But the main thing is our training, where people are coming through and doing this intense process of taking responsibility for their own passions, their own deep wounds, and their own wanting to heal themselves and others, and turning that into real world vision for change, and also helping people learn how to collaborate together, because that's a big piece that's missing for many people. Like they have an idea of something they want to do, but they don't know how to start, and they don't know how to find the team members. And then we also work with activists who are just oftentimes feeling alone, don't have the kind of spiritual resources that they need to be able to do the work on a sustainable level. So that's that. And then we have many initiatives, like we have a voting initiative trying to get people who do yoga to go in, bring their yogic values into the voting booths and into the voting process. We have initiatives to work with empowering youth who get stuck in some, destructive systems, especially what's called at-risk youth. Working with people who have addictions, people who have body dysmorphia and body issues. So we have a lot of programs, basically. And I'm the director of our global fundraising program, and we have raised over $3.5 million over the last 7 years to go and work with organizations in different countries that are implementing on the ground solutions to some of the biggest problems. And so what we do is we ask the yoga community to go out and raise a significant amount of money, and then whoever raises that money comes with us, and they get to actually work on the projects that they've been fundraising for all year. And it's a life-changing journey.
Yeah, I bet. So if you raise the most money, you get to go and actually be a part of the project that money is going toward. That's brilliant.
And really learn from the people in those particular countries, not only the problem, the root of the problem, but also some of the solutions that they are implementing. So, for instance, not last year, but the year before, we went to work with organizations that were working with victims of sex trafficking in Kolkata, India. And the thing that was interesting is that sex trafficking is now being much more visible in the rest of the world, but it has for a long time not been visible in the United States. So there haven't been a lot of solution-oriented programs that have come out around it. Whereas in India, it's been a problem for much longer, or it's been a visible problem for much longer. So they have some really interesting solutions for helping these girls heal, find jobs, find ways that they can become, viable parts of society. And so it's, not only are we serving, but we're being served because we're learning on the ground solutions. We're learning how things are working with people who are immersed in the problem and are dedicated to the problem and have spent their lives working on these solutions.
One thing I've noticed, like being in the part of the yoga community, and also having friends outside the yoga community, is there seems to be a split between those in the yoga community doing a lot of personal work like excavating and working with demons and wounds and all of that. And then a lot of my other friends weren't necessarily actively doing that work, but they're right out there politically, like involved politically, and yet there was a bit of a split. It sounds to me like Off the Mat bridges that gap where the personal work and the political is happening.
It's exactly what we do, and we never get lost in either one. It's like, the yoga community can be navel gazing and can be, completely self-involved, right? And that doesn't serve anyone, no matter how healed you are, no matter how much asana you perfect. And then, there's people who are so immersed in the crisis that they don't remember to care for themselves, and so it becomes a burnout situation, a fatigue situation, and so. Yeah, I mean, the idea is to keep doing that. And even when we go out in the field on these global Seva Challenge trips, we come back every night. We do yoga every morning. We go out and work in the field. It can be devastating. It can be intense. It can be triggering of one's own trauma. And because of that, rather than just going back to the hotel and going back to sleep, we always do a process of becoming present to what's real for us, and so it's always like this back and forth, and we're trying to stay conscious. And obviously the people who are alpha people and are just action oriented, they're like, oh, I don't want to do the processing. And then the people who are doing the processing, they're like, oh, I don't want to do anything with this, I just want to heal myself. And so we're gently and trying to compassionately push people and say, if not us in the yoga community, who? I mean, we have the privilege to be able to do this work. We have some of these skills and tools to deal with our own trauma. Most people in the world don't. So who better than us to at least attempt to do this? And, we've gotten a lot of flack for it because we don't know everything. We haven't perfected all of the pieces yet, but we've been bold enough to start. And that's our message to other people. That's just start. You will learn what you need to learn.
Yeah. I can see why Marianne Elliott, of course, she's the New Zealander who got involved with you guys, why it was so big for her. Because, of course, she came from that, working directly in Gaza Strip and working in Afghanistan, and then as a result going into burnout, finding yoga and coming to it from that angle.
Yeah, she's like the poster child. And then she started working with people doing in the field, doing this trauma work with them. And it's so crucial. Trauma, what we found over the last 8 years of doing these trainings is that trauma work has become very important, crucial even, and also social justice work, like educating the yoga community about some of the biggest social issues of our time. And that's been a big surprise to us. And then the biggest surprise to me is how many people are working to actually find their voice. Like it's been my life's work, but I'm realizing more and more that it's a huge part of our activism, of our stepping out into leadership, is finding our voice. And many, many, many people, that's their biggest wound.
Yeah,
it's fascinating.
It makes sense. So you've been sort of in New Zealand, Australia, as Off the Mat for a while, but there's a big push coming through right now to get people in New Zealand and in Australia joining up, isn't there?
Because we're coming there.
Yeah, that's it.
And we're going to be doing a version of these intensives, and so we want to get people trained up. I mean, the thing is that there's this very specific process that we take people through of yoga, self-inquiry, social justice, trauma work, looking at things from a spiritual perspective as well as a practical perspective, then going into collaboration, communication, then going into visioning, and we really at the end of the intensive get people to start. Like, it's like, you have a vision, now go. Here are the first steps you can take.
You really
so it's vision to manifestation in a week.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like you really give people the tools, because so many people I know are going, oh, I want to do something, I want to affect change, but they don't know where to start, they don't know how to apply themselves. It's just such a big thing. It's like, how can I, do anything? But I guess
and they think they have to be perfect, or they think they have to know exactly what that, they care about so many things that they can't pick one thing. And the key to figure out where to serve next is what breaks your heart about the world and what is joyful to you. Like, there's some place where those two pieces come together and that you can serve. I'll give you an example. So because I'm a musician and because of what I do, many of the most powerful and profound in the field experiences I've had, and I would never have guessed this in the beginning. I was thinking, I'm just going to go work. I'm building buildings. I'm building schools and orphanages. I'm just doing this thing. But what I've learned is that all over the world, people love to sing and they love to dance, and we're human beings are kind of hardwired for it, right?
Yeah.
So. But I didn't think I would be able to bring that specific musician part of me to these places. But what I found is that over and over again, it bridges the gap, right? So it's the thing I love, and I'm bringing it to the most wounded places I can imagine. And there was one point where we were in Haiti, in the tent cities, and we had been asked to move a garbage dump from one place to another. And the year before we'd been in Uganda, and I'd had this great jam session with these little kids, and they were playing plastic jugs because they didn't have drums. And so I'm in this dump, and all these, the villagers are watching a bunch of basically white people move this trash, and it was really uncomfortable. Yeah. We're like, this is horrible, and we kept trying to get them to get involved, and then finally I just picked up a plastic jug and I started singing. And then one by one, the little kids came over and they started singing with us. And then eventually the whole village came. And then eventually we had this party in this garbage dump. And then we had the conveyor belt of everybody, us and the village, moving the garbage. And to me, it was like, a big aha. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thing that I love is also the key to my service.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the thing that you love, because this is what you're bringing to Wanderlust, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing, so to encapsulate my life's work, at this moment, I would say my life's work is to remind us all that we're hardwired for self-expression in community. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we have civilized ourselves away from, right? So think about it. In civilized cultures, most people only let themselves express themselves in the car or in the shower. If that, right? And my point is that, we all of us are indigenous to some culture, and every indigenous culture has some way that we ritualize the expression of the soul, letting the soul out, specifically through the voice, right? Yeah. And so it's tragic because wherever I go, whether I'm performing or teaching, I always say, how many people were told that you couldn't or shouldn't sing? And it's usually like 90% of the room. And that's tragic to me because it's medicinal for us to use our voices. Mm-hmm. It's medicinal. And there's a whole science behind the science of sound. And I often, when I'm teaching, do talk a lot about the science behind it. But the point is that we don't have times or places or permission to express ourselves through movement, but more particularly through the sound of our own voice. Mm-hmm. And what that does is it shuts us down when we need to be vocal advocates for change, when we need to be speaking our truth, when we need to heal ourselves. So finding our voice is a huge part of healing ourselves and also healing some of the disempowering patterns and contexts that we live in the world. And thus, I feel like it's a huge part of our activism. Yeah. So I'm launching a training right now inside of Off the Mat called Voice of Change, which is an online training about this very thing. Like what is the bridge between me finding my voice and the wounds that live here, the inner critic especially, for many people, it's very strong. How do I work gently and kindly with that to release it? And by the way, it's very blissful to do so. Like just beyond that wall of utter abject terror is pure bliss, because there's a science behind that too. How do I move through those places so that I can do the thing that my soul is calling me to do?
Because you see that in classes, like just in a simple yoga class, even if I'm doing an om with people that haven't om before, like it's one simple sound, and yet it really freaks people out. This idea of, oh my God, I've got to make a sound and somebody might hear me.
I know. It's horrifying for people, and I hate to laugh, but the funny thing is that, in doing this work, I often get told to be quiet. Like, it's really interesting to me how uncomfortable making noise makes people. I was teaching at a conference last weekend, and they had hired me to come in and teach, and we're in this, self-expressive point, and the security guys came in and tried to shut me down, and I was like, no, I am not going to be quiet. Wow. And so it's interesting to me how triggered people get by it, and how naked and raw it feels for people. But again, because there's so much charge there, on the other side of that is this pure liberation.
That's it. Well, you see when you manage to take them through and they start to make that sound, the shift that happens when you're on the other side of it.
Yeah. And so to me, it's like liberation. It's medicinal. It's very natural for us. And so I see my work as just reminding people this is what we're hardwired for, people. We're supposed to come together in groups and sing and chant and dance and move. This is what we're supposed to do. It takes a lot of effort to shut that down. Yeah. And there's reasons why. I mean, we're living in cultures of trauma. We're living in cultures of addiction. We're living in cultures for many people that, they didn't have a voice when they were growing up. They were disempowered from day one. Yeah. And so, I'm not making light of the healing process, because I know that it can be very emotional for people when they do tap into their authentic voice and they do find that liberation. And there's a lot of grief for the ways in which we don't have access to that, which is why I think ritual is so important too. Like another piece that I bring to the table is I'm a trained priestess. I've been working in ritual, earth-based spirituality systems for many years, and doing it on a large scale. And the part of the reason I'm doing that is because it can be used to create revolutions, right? Yeah. Ritual. I mean, the whole music is a huge part of revolutions, and I don't mean violent revolutions. I mean revolutions of the spirit. I mean revolutions of the human soul rising up and saying, any oppressions that we live under are no longer apply here.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I say revolution, it's like, the ritual can be used to bring, for me, ritual is just the art of designing energy. It's how to bring people together to unify their hearts and minds and souls for a particular purpose. And that purpose is always empowerment. It's always expression, and it's always connection, right? So again, we used to have places in our lives where we could, maybe it was once a month or whatever, come together as a community and allow the shadow to come out and allow ourselves to connect with each other and allow ourselves to connect with the cycles of the seasons and the earth itself. And we just don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
And it's
tragic. Dance culture, like dance music culture, full moon parties, in dance music culture and electronica, that's all about the ritual, right? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of drugs going on, etc. But that's why it's been so powerful and attractive for people, because of that opportunity to let loose in that tribal community way.
Tribal is the big word, actually, and I agree with you. And having done music festivals actually for many years now, and seeing the transformation from the drug culture into more conscious behavior patterns, more more learning, more opportunities for people to come together and be in the sacred without having to have that jump start. I mean, to me, that's another reason to do ritual. It's another reason for self-expression. So we go to altered states of consciousness without necessarily needing to take drugs every time. Like, we know those spaces exist where we are connected to all things. We know we're part of this web of nature. We know we're part of the web of life, and we can get there. We have pathways, we have doorways to go there, and ritual is a huge part of that. So is self-expression. So watching the evolution of the festival culture toward this has been really wonderful for me.
Yeah,
and I think Wanderlust is a big part of that too.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I saw with Wanderlust, because I spent my 20s at dance parties and raves and nightclubs, right? Because I love dance and the freedom and all that. So when I saw Wanderlust, that was what tweaked it for me. I'm like, that is amazing, because it's creating that same kind of vibe, but in a more conscious, educated, learning, natural way. So.
Yeah, and it's a normal evolution. Like, I've been watching the festivals go toward this for a long time, just purely in the interest of sustainability, but also in the interest of noticing that we are a tribe that has some power. We're not just on the fringe. We're actually people that can make change happen. We're actually people that, again, if we come together with our resources, we can change how people spend their money. We can change policy in the political system. We can change, the larger, the way the larger community thinks about the world. We can have an effect on that.
Well, I see that one of the classes that you're going to be offering at both Wanderlust in New Zealand and in Australia is called How to Start a Revolution. Right? You're doing this one with Kara-Leah and with the DJ as well. So, How to Start a Revolution. I'm imagining, I have no idea what you're doing in that. What are you doing? How are you instructing
It's kind of talking about the revolution's already begun, right? The revolution has already started. It's happening. But how do you start it? You actually have to be willing to do this, as you and I talked about, this continual process of self-inquiry. As you're going through the external changes, you have to be willing to be conscious throughout it. And we're not taught those skills and tools very often. And we also have to work together, right? I mean, another piece of the revolution is you get a bunch of people who have different ideas and ideals, and you bring them together towards a common goal. And so, again, that's what the discussion is in that class. And the class is very physical. We go through, turning our own asana practice on its head. We go through, making commitments to people, to ourselves, to people in this ritual setting. We go through, stepping out and making a commitment means I'm speaking my truth about what I care about in the world, what I see needs happening in the world. I'm willing to put myself out there and say that. Those are all revolutionary things to do. So it's just talking about what are we already doing that is seeding this global revolution of the spirit. And for some people it's happening too slow. I sometimes think it's happening too slow. Sometimes I can see it. I can really see it, and I'm like, I really see how this community, this tribal community, is growing, expanding, and changing. And it's not perfect, but we're magnetizing more and more people into, especially as they do the yoga practice, they detoxify, they start to get in touch with their deep core values. And for many people, the deep core values include, a sense of being connected to everything else. And once you have a spiritual connection to the world, it's really hard not to work for the continuation of that world. It's just almost impossible.
Yeah, I mean, you are the world is you. It becomes the same. One final question about one of the classes that you're teaching. I love this title. You call it "I Sing the Body Electric."
And that's my favorite class.
Can you tell us about that class so that people,
Sure.
get that idea of like, yeah, this is something I need to sign up for?
Yeah, it's about how sound, being a physical thing, moves us at the cellular level and shakes us up at the cellular level. And sound has been used in many ancient cultures as an awakening tool, as a tool for healing and health. Mm-hmm. And modern science is starting to prove what many indigenous cultures have known all along. Yeah. So it's a conversation about bridging those two things, and what is the science behind the medicinal quality of sound, particularly singing, but many different kinds of sound. And then we go right into how do you basically clear out the stuck energy of your body using sound and asana and breath. And we work our way through some of the energetic blocks using sound itself because it's so physical. And then we kind of go into this very playful, ecstatic state with the singing. And so I kind of like trick people into singing to a certain extent, even people who don't think they can sing at all. And then we drop in and we send, we sing our prayers to the world. And it's a very emotional, beautiful class. And I hope a lot of people come. It's not scary, even though a lot of people are like, I'm scared to sing. It's actually a very gentle journey through the purification of one's own voice and the revealing of the soul through allowing one's voice to be heard, and then also the liberation that comes from recognizing that this is our birthright. We're born to do this. We're born to express ourselves. And so, again, my work is to give people the freedom, the key to that particular liberation pathway. Yeah. And it brings me joy like I can't even tell you. It's really like life's work.
I can feel it. I can feel that joy. It sounds incredibly powerful, and yeah, it'll be amazing. I can't wait to see you at Wanderlust. And I know I said one final question, but I'm trying to ask everyone I interview this question. When you think of New Zealand, what is the first thing that springs to mind?
The first thing that springs to mind when I think of New Zealand, I think of whales is one of them. And the songs of whales.
Yeah, of course.
Whales and dolphins are some of my favorite creatures, and the sort of like the ancient wisdom that is embedded in the whale songs. Mm-hmm. And I also think of the landscape, the sort of like green rolling hills, because I'm a Scottish ancestry, and so there's some kind of similarity of that. The dramatic rolling hills and the cliffs and the water banging against the cliffs, and so the high drama of the landscape is I'm very much looking forward to immersing myself in that and feeling the magic of the land, because one of the things that I do when I travel is I like to tap into what is the specific flavor of the magical tradition or the beliefs, the spiritual belief system of the indigenous people of this land, and I try and just feel into it. So I'm very excited to feel into the particular texture there.
Because it's the first time you've been to New Zealand?
Yeah, I've been to Australia, but I've not been to New Zealand.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you feel like you're coming home. I don't know.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yay. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and like I said, I can't wait to see you at Wanderlust.
Yay, I'm looking forward to meeting you too.